Adama was 14, but her eyes often felt older than her face. They had seen things children weren't meant to see, the quiet ache of a mother's silence, the sour slur of a drunken man, and the way the village eyes could cut a girl into pieces without ever raising a hand. Yet she never raised her voice in return. She walked with her head slightly bent, listening more than speaking, and when she smiled, it was soft, like dusk settling on warm earth. She lived in a clay-walled hut near the far edge of Umuozu, a village where gossip walked faster than the wind. Her stepfather, Okoro, ruled the home with a cracked walking stick and louder curses than prayers. He was a man bloated with disappointment, in his life, in the world, and most of all, in the girl who wasn't his blood. Her mother, Ngozi, was once known for her bright laughter, but now her voice only lived in hushed warnings and sad hums while stirring soup. Since the death of Adama's grandmother, the house had grown smaller, colder, not in size but in soul. Yet there was one thing that never left Adama, a necklace strung on a raffia cord, always tucked beneath her blouse. It wasn't shiny or expensive. In fact, most dismissed it as village junk, a rust-tinged pendant the size of a cowrie shell, worn smooth by time and touch. But to Adama it was everything. It had belonged to her grandmother, the only person who ever told her she was meant for more than pounding yam or running errands. On her deathbed, wrinkled fingers trembling, Grandma Nena had pressed it into Adama's palm and whispered, "Keep this close. One day it will know its way home, and so will you." Adama hadn't understood then. But she wore it every day since, its weight a quiet promise against her chest. There was a carving on it, almost invisible unless the light hit just right, a pattern of 3 lines branching into a sunburst. Most thought it decorative. Only Mama Nena had ever looked at it with reverence, not just affection. Each morning before the rooster crowed, Adama knelt beside the hut's back wall and prayed. She didn't ask for riches or escape. She only whispered, "Let today not swallow me whole." And always, her fingers found the pendant, thumb rubbing circles across the faded engraving. Koro hated the necklace. He never said so plainly, not at first, but his eyes narrowed each time he saw her hold it. "Still wearing that nonsense?" he scoffed one morning, staggering in from the palm wine stall. "You think spirits live in rusted metal?" Adama said nothing. She had learned that silence protected more than answers ever did. "Waste of charm on a girl like you," he added, belching as he scratched his chest. "Even the village drunk wouldn't pay 1 cowrie for it. But you guard it like it's royal blood." Ngozi glanced up from where she was peeling yam but quickly looked away. Okoro's words always fell like stones, sharp, heavy, and meant to bruise. She had tried once, long ago, to stand up for her daughter, but it had cost her 3 days of silence and the sting of shame in front of neighbors. Now she spoke only in defense of peace, not truth. That day, as Adama fetched water from the stream, 2 girls from the next compound watched her pass. "Do you see how she touches that necklace all the time?" one said. "Maybe it has a spell inside." "Maybe she thinks she's better than us," the other added. Adama heard. She always heard. But she didn't turn around. She kept walking, humming low beneath her breath, a tune her grandmother used to sing while plaiting her hair, soft and steady like the flow of the stream. In truth, not everyone in the village mocked her. A few of the elders would nod when she passed, whispering words she never caught. Once, the old yam seller, Papa Jide, asked to see the pendant up close. When she showed it to him, he squinted and blinked, then slowly backed away muttering, "Omo enyoki, strange things return in simple wrappings." He never spoke of it again. At night, Adama would sometimes sit under the pawpaw tree behind the hut, holding the pendant up to the moonlight. She traced the markings with her nail, wondering why it mattered, and to whom. "Grandma, what did you mean?" she'd ask the stars. "What is it that I carry?" Her mother once tried to explain in whispers after Okoro had passed out from drink. "That necklace," Ngozi said, "was not always ours. Your grandmother, she was once close to someone powerful. But war came and everyone lost something." "Who was it?" Adama asked, eyes wide. Ngozi only shook her head. "It is better not to say. Some truths carry weight. Not all backs can bear them." But Adama's back had already borne many things: hunger, loneliness, silence. She felt the necklace pressing against her now like a drumbeat beneath her skin, soft but insistent. She dreamed of it sometimes. Of a wide hall with marble floors and firelit walls, of a woman cloaked in royal beads reaching out to her with knowing eyes. "You kept it," the woman always said, even when no one else saw it. Adama didn't understand. But something told her, the world may not see her, may not believe in her. But the necklace remembered. And that meant she had a story still waiting to be told. so she held it tighter. And waited. Asked ChatGPT. The sun had barely tipped above the mango trees when Okoro stumbled toward the palm wine stall at the village square. His wrapper hung loose on one shoulder, and his eyes darted restlessly beneath his heavy brow. His mouth was already dry, his throat itching with the hunger only palm wine could quench. He leaned against the wooden stall and slapped a calabash onto the counter. 2 gourds, he barked. The thick kind. No water. The wine cellar, Emeka raised an eyebrow. He knew Okoro, knew the stench of desperation and unpaid tabs. You've not settled your last one, he said flatly, not lifting his hands from where he polished a gourd. Okoro's smile was tight and crooked. You know I'm good for it. You were good for it 3 moons ago, Emeka replied. Now you're only good at shouting and leaving debts. A few villagers nearby chuckled under their breath. Okoro's face flushed with heat, but it wasn't just the sun. He could feel the sting of eyes crawling across his back. Gossip had quick feet in Umuozu, and humiliation moved even faster. He muttered a curse, turned on his heel and staggered away, fists clenched, heart pounding, shame curdling into fury. By the time he reached home, sweat soaked his back and his breath was thick with rage. The compound was quiet. Ngozi had gone to help at the grinding stone with the other women. Only Adama sat on the low wooden stool outside the hut, shelling groundnuts into a bowl. Her eyes lifted when she saw him, wary. He stood over her for a moment, breathing heavily. Then his eyes fell on the raffia cord peeking from beneath her blouse. The necklace. Without a word he lunged. She barely had time to cry out before his rough hands yanked the pendant from her neck. The string snapped and the bowl of groundnuts tumbled. "Papa, no!" she gasped, scrambling after him. "Please, my necklace." But Okoro was already storming down the path, clutching it tight in his fist. "Let's see what it's really worth," he growled. Adama ran after him barefoot, heart slamming against her ribs, but he moved faster than she expected. She reached the square just in time to see him vanish behind the row of stalls. She darted to Emeka's counter, breathless. "Where is he?" "My father, he had something of mine." Emeka looked at her blankly. "The drunk one?" "He left. Gave a necklace to that traveling merchant. The one with the donkey cart." Adama's voice caught in her throat. "He sold it." Emeka shrugged. "Traded it. Said it was some family heirloom." The merchant looked bored but gave him 2 gourds in exchange. "Where is the merchant?" she cried, panic rising. "Gone already. He moves fast, heading toward the eastern trail." Adama turned and ran, dust kicking behind her feet, but when she reached the bend at the edge of the village there was nothing. No cart. No merchant. No necklace. Her legs buckled. She sank beneath the pawpaw tree where her grandmother once used to sit in the evenings, humming softly while cleaning herbs. The same tree under which she had first been told the stories of brave women and sacred things. She pressed her forehead to the dry roots. "She trusted me," she whispered, trembling. "She gave it to me to keep. Now it's gone. I let her down." Behind her eyelids, tears slid like warm threads. Around her, the sounds of the village faded into the hum of wind, rustling gently through the branches above. Night fell slowly, wrapping her in blue shadows. Ngozi returned to find her there, face streaked with dust and tears, eyes vacant. When Adama told her what had happened, Ngozi sat beside her, silent, her hands shaking as they tried to comfort her daughter. "I should have hidden it better," Adama murmured. "No," Ngozi said, voice tight with guilt. "He should have known better." They didn't eat that night. The firewood in the kitchen remained unlit. Only the moon kept them company, casting silver shapes across the dirt. When sleep finally came, it was deep and strange. In the dream, Adama found herself standing in a wide stone hall, cool and echoing. Torches flickered along the walls, and the air carried the scent of something ancient, frankincense and river clay. A woman approached, tall and radiant, wrapped in royal beads that shimmered like dew on spiderwebs. Her skin was dark and flawless, her voice low and layered, like song buried beneath thunder. "You wore it with faith," the woman said. "But it was never yours alone." Adama stared, confused, but the woman only extended her hand, palm upward. "Return what is mine." The dream dissolved like smoke. Adama jolted awake beneath the tree, sweat on her brow, heart thumping. The sky was still dark, stars scattered like seeds. She sat up slowly, breath catching in her throat. The words clung to her like a second skin. "Return what is mine." She didn't know how or when. But something inside her had shifted. The necklace wasn't just a keepsake anymore. It was a calling. By morning the dream still clung to Adama's skin like morning mist, soft, cold and impossible to shake off. The voice of the woman from the dream echoed in her ears as clearly as the first bell of dawn. Return what is mine. She hadn't eaten. She barely washed. As the village came alive with pounding mortars and rooster calls, Adama slipped away from her compound, a folded piece of paper pressed against her chest. She had stayed up all night drawing the pendant from memory, her hand trembling as she shaped the lines, the sunburst pattern, the slight curve of the metal edge. Every detail had been etched in her since childhood. Now it lived on paper, fragile, desperate. Her destination was the oldest part of the village, where time seemed to walk slower. That was where Mama Chibunda lived, a woman said to be older than most of the trees, with a voice like broom straw and eyes that saw everything and nothing at once. They called her the last tongue of the palace, for she had served as a maid during the final days of the old king's court before the war drove everything into silence. Adama found her seated under a crooked guava tree, legs wrapped in a faded wrapper, chewing bitter cola with the slow certainty of someone who had nowhere else to be. "Good morning, Mama," Adama greeted, bowing low. Mama Chibundu squinted, then smiled faintly. "Ah, Nena's child. You walk like her. Too quiet for your own good." Adama knelt and handed the folded paper forward with both hands. "Mama, I need your eyes. Can you look at this?" The old woman took it, unfolded it slowly and adjusted the shawl over her shoulders. Her gaze hovered over the drawing, tracing the lines, pausing at the sunburst. For a moment, nothing moved but the wind through her scarf. Then she gasped. Her hand trembled. The paper fluttered slightly. "Where did you see this?" she asked, voice suddenly sharp. Adama hesitated. "It was mine. My stepfather sold it for drink. But I drew it from memory." Mama Chibunda looked at her, really looked at her, eyes narrowing into slits. "You say was?" Adama nodded, shame blooming across her chest. "It's gone now. A traveling merchant has it." The old woman exhaled like someone trying to blow out a fire that had waited too long. "Child, this was the Queen Mother's pendant. I saw it with these eyes. I polished it with my own hands when I was 16. Adama's breath caught. "The Queen Mother?" "Yes. During the war, when soldiers marched through the Eastern Valley, the royal family fled. The Queen Mother hid in this very village under a false name. That pendant was the only thing she carried, not for beauty but for protection. She wore it under her wrapper, close to her skin. Then, how did it end up with my grandmother?" Mama Chibundu leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Your grandmother was not always a herb seller. Nena once worked in the palace kitchens. Quiet, clever, always watching. When the queen fled, she trusted Nena to carry the pendant if they got separated. She told her, if anything happens, keep it safe. And if ever it is found, it will lead the way home." Adama's mouth went dry. She saw flashes now, her grandmother tending wounds in the night, whispering into herbs before grinding them, always touching the pendant before making decisions. The stories made sense now, not just folklore but memory. "So, it's real?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "More real than gold," Mama Chibundu said. "That pendant bears the seal of the old dynasty. The king who rules now, her son, has searched for it for years. He believes it is the final sign to fulfill his mother's last wish." Adama stared at the sketch. Her throat tightened. "I must find it," she said. "I have to get it back." But Mama Chibundu's gaze grew hard. "Many have tried. Thieves, liars, desperate men. Some thought to ransom it. Others vanished. That necklace calls truth to the surface, but it also calls danger." Adama met her eyes, fear twisting inside her. "Then why did she come to me in the dream?" The old woman studied her, then reached out and touched Adama's forehead gently. "Because blood remembers. Because faith has a path. Because maybe, just maybe, a girl who carries silence better than pride is the only one who can bring it home." A breeze passed through the guava leaves, shaking them lightly like hands clapping in secret. "Go," Mama Chibunda said. "But not in fear. If the pendant finds its way back to the throne, let it be because a heart guided it, not ambition." Adama stood, head spinning. She didn't know where the merchant had gone. She didn't know how far she would have to travel. But her feet somehow already felt lighter. The path had begun. Adama left Umuozu just after dawn, the horizon glazed pink, a small sack of dried gari on her back and Mama Chibundu's warning beating against her ribs like a second pulse. She walked the eastern track until her soles throbbed, asking every traveler if they'd seen a merchant with a donkey cart and restless eyes. By noon a drummer overtook her, goatskin drums slung beside his hip, sticks tapping in idle rhythm. He remembered the man, tall, lean, laughing too loud, headed toward a ford junction where caravans gathered before pushing on to the city. The drummer shared roasted groundnuts and pointed to a distant smear of dust. "If your legs are quick, sister, you'll catch him before sunset." She hurried, barefoot, stones pricking her heels. By late afternoon she spied the caravan. 5 donkey carts, bundles of kola nut, calabashes, dyed cloth. Her breath came ragged, feet cracked and bleeding, but she pressed closer, scanning every face. Smoke from cooking fires curled over a makeshift camp near the riverbank. Merchants lounged, bartering gossip as eagerly as wares. At the edge of the group a tall man lifted a gourd of water, head thrown back. Even in fading light she recognized the slope of his shoulders from memory. Ikenna, the one who'd bargained her grandmother's pendant for 2 gourds of wine. Gathering courage she approached. "Sir," she began, voice shaking. "I'm looking for a necklace, bronze on a raffia string. My stepfather traded it to you." Ikenna wiped his mouth, eyes sweeping over her torn wrapper and dusty hair. "Ah, the drunk's daughter." He clicked his tongue. "Sold it to a goldsmith the moment I reached the last market. Paid good coin." His gaze slid away, dismissive. A sickness rolled through her stomach. "Do you know the goldsmith's name?" "Many buy trinkets," he said, busying himself with tethering a donkey. "Try your luck in the city." Something in his tone jarred her, too rehearsed, too quick. As camp settled into night, she kept watch from a patch of elephant grass, hunger forgotten. Merchants laughed around fires. Ikenna sat apart, back against a cartwheel. Moonlight silvered the air. When he thought no one watched, he reached into a goatskin satchel, drew out the pendant and held it under the moon. His thumb brushed the sunburst engraving. His face, caught between greed and fear, softened with something almost like sorrow. Adama's breath caught. She stepped from the shadows, rustling the grass. Ikenna jerked, fumbling to hide the necklace. "You lied," she said, voice low. "Why?" He glanced at the sleeping camp, then at her bruised feet. "Because people kill for royal things," he whispered. "A farmer in River Bend once found a princess's anklet. 3 nights later raiders took his life for it. I don't fancy dying for a drunkard's mistake." She knelt beside him, palms open. "It isn't cursed. It's a promise. The queen who lost it is still alive. Her son, the king, searches for it. Give it back and it will bless you, not harm you." Ikenna studied her, lantern light flickering over his wary eyes. "Bless me? Or expose me? If guards learn I stole royal treasure, my days end on a pike." "You didn't steal," she said. "He sold it. But I will tell them it was never truly yours. I will speak for you." Tears stung her eyes. "That necklace is my grandmother's honor. I must return it. Please." He exhaled, shoulders sagging. "I knew it was royal," he murmured. "Saw the seal straight away. Thought to trade it upriver, but each time I tried my hand felt heavy. Like it knew it didn't belong." He opened his fist, and the pendant glowed warm bronze in moonlight. "Is it cursed, girl?" "It's history," she answered. "History punishes those who bury it." Silence stretched. Crickets sang. Finally he nodded once, slow. "At dawn we leave for the city. You can ride with my caravan. But understand, if trouble comes you're not my blood. You speak for both of us." She clasped the necklace to her heart, relief flooding like rain on hard soil. "I will speak truth," she vowed. He stood and fetched a small flask. "Drink. For courage, and your cracked feet." She sipped bitter cola wine, eyes never leaving the pendant now safe in her palm. Somewhere beyond the river, city lights waited. Beyond them, a palace and a queen mother who still dreamt of a sunburst etched in bronze. Adama lay on a mat beneath the cart, stars wheeling overhead. All night she kept the necklace pressed to her chest, listening to her heartbeat echo the river's hush. Dawn would bring new dangers, but for the first time since the pendant was snatched from her neck, hope breathed beside her like a steady drum. Ask ChatGPT. The journey to the river town was long and hot. The red dust clung to Adama's skin, and the clatter of donkey hooves along the path blended with her heartbeat. Ikenna barely spoke, keeping the pendant hidden deep in his bag, glancing at her now and then with wary respect. By the 3rd day the forest gave way to wide, open plains, and the road sloped toward Umuakwa, the largest river town before the city gates. Smoke from cooking fires curled over tin roofs, and wooden canoes dotted the glistening shoreline like sleeping birds. But the first thing Adama noticed wasn't the river. It was the guards. They were everywhere, men in red and blue tunics, swords at their sides, scanning faces, questioning traders. One stood at the merchant gate inspecting crates of cloth, while another overturned a basket of carved beads. Horses snorted, restless as the soldiers moved with urgency. Adama gripped Ikena's sleeve. "Something's wrong," she whispered. He looked grim. "They're searching." Searching for what? They didn't have to wait long for the answer. That evening, as merchants gathered at the riverside inn to drink palm wine and bargain over goods, word spread like wildfire. The king, once proud and feared, was gravely ill, unable to speak or rise from bed. The palace priest had declared that only one object could save him: the pendant of the Queen Mother, lost during her exile decades ago. The moment Adama heard the words, the air around her thickened. Her mouth went dry. "It's the necklace," she whispered. "It's the one I carry." Ikena heard too, and his eyes changed. Not with awe but calculation. "We can't go to the palace now," he said quickly. "We'll be arrested. The guards don't know who had it first, they'll just assume we stole it. I'll explain. I'll tell them the truth." "Truth won't protect us," he hissed. "Don't you see? The price just went up. If the king's life depends on it, a collector would pay 10 times more. We could disappear with enough to live like chiefs." Adama stepped back. "You want to sell it? To someone who knows its worth? We don't need the palace. Let them search forever." She stared at him in disbelief. "My grandmother said it must return by the hands of truth, not greed." "That was her story," Ikena snapped. "Mine is survival." He turned and stalked off toward a cluster of dark alleys where traders and smugglers liked to drink. Adama stood frozen. The necklace, so close to home, to the throne, now dangled between selfish hands and selfish hearts. If Ikena sold it to the wrong person, it would vanish forever into a chest or a museum far across the seas. That night, as the river town fell into uneasy sleep, Adama waited. She watched from the shadows as Ikena drank at the corner stall, palm wine sloshing down his beard. His voice grew loud, his words sloppy. Twice he clutched his bag protectively, then set it down beside him as he laughed with strangers. Adama moved like breath. No footsteps. No sound. One hand reached beneath the bench. Her fingers brushed leather. The bag was there. She slid it out slowly, heart pounding in her ears. No one noticed. Not even Ikena. She didn't run. She walked, steady, silent, through the narrow paths to the riverside, where the canoes slept, tied loosely to crooked posts. The moon hung low, gold on black water. A few fishermen snored on mats. One canoe was untied, half covered with a frayed mat. She climbed in, loosened the rope, and pushed away from shore. The water took her gently, silently. In her bag, a water gourd, a spare wrapper, and the pendant, warm in her palm like it knew it had been chosen again. She looked once toward the lights of the river town. Somewhere behind her, Ikena would wake and curse. The guards would search longer. The king's breaths would grow slower. But the river moved forward. And so did she. Alone now. But never more certain. The canoe drifted into the reed banks of the eastern shore just as dawn smeared the sky with orange and clay red. Adama stepped into the muddy shallows, clutching her small bundle and the calabash tied to her back. Inside, the Queen Mother's pendant was wrapped in cloth and leaves, guarded as if it were breath itself. Her legs ached from hours of crouching, her stomach growled like distant thunder, but she didn't stop. Not when the trees thickened. Not when the path narrowed into thorny bush. She only walked toward the palace. Her first days on foot passed in a haze of dust and hunger. She begged for cassava at hamlets too small to be named. When no food was offered, she sang the lullabies her grandmother once whispered by firelight. Her voice, soft and clear, often earned her small coins, roasted plantains, or a place to sleep under someone's porch. She walked mostly by morning light, rested when the sun scorched the earth, and pressed forward when the cool of evening settled in. Every night, she checked the calabash, untying the rope knots with shaking fingers. The pendant was still there, nestled like a sleeping child. She never let it leave her side. Not even when she bathed in streams or slept beside goats in someone's shed. Not even when the wind howled and the branches creaked with stories. On the 5th day, rain came like a curtain, thick, angry, relentless. She was halfway through a forest path, where trees arched like gatekeepers, when the sky burst open. Her wrapper clung to her like wet bark, her feet sank into mud, and her hair knotted against her forehead. She sheltered under a hollow tree, wrapping herself around the calabash, her chin trembling. That night she didn't sleep. Her dreams came while she was awake, her grandmother's voice humming, the Queen Mother's silhouette whispering, "You were chosen because you carry silence without bitterness." But silence was heavy. Heavier than mud. heavier than a necklace. On the seventh day she reached a busy roadside where traders passed with camels and carts heading to the outer regions of the king's lands. The palace was still far, 2 more days by foot, they said. A woman with kind eyes gave her leftover akbar wrapped in banana leaf. A boy offered water from his gourd after she sang near the roadside shrine. People didn't ask questions. Some simply touched her shoulder like she was familiar or maybe sacred. Still, danger hovered like dust in her footprints. Late on the 8th night, 3 young men spotted her walking alone, her feet bleeding, eyes sunken from exhaustion. They called to her from behind a rock, first sweetly then sharply. "Where are you going, pretty girl? What's in the calabash?" She didn't answer. They followed her for some distance, laughing in the dark, their voices thick with trouble. One grabbed her arm. Her screams startled birds from the trees. A man from a passing bullock cart came running with a long stick. The boys scattered. The man didn't speak, only nodded to her bundle. "Whatever you're carrying, girl," he muttered, "carry it fast." She didn't sleep that night, just sat under a shrine tree and prayed. On the 10th morning the palace walls rose before her, towering, white, and terrifying. Her legs gave out halfway up the stone steps. She crawled the rest of the way, trembling and soaked with river dirt, sweat, and tears. The guards at the gate looked at her like a joke. She was barefoot, skinny, with cracked lips and swollen feet. One of them chuckled. "What does this one want?" I came with something," she said, barely able to speak. Another smirked. "Everyone comes with something." Adama opened her arms and carefully pulled the calabash from her back. Her fingers trembled as she untied the rope. She lifted the cloth slowly, revealing the necklace. For a moment no one moved. Then the older guard stepped forward. His eyes widened. His voice dropped to a whisper. "By the gods. This is it," he said to the others. "It bears the seal of the old line. This is the Queen Mother's pendant." The laughter died instantly. "Where did you find this?" the first guard asked, his tone now cautious. "It was mine," Adama said, voice hoarse. "It was given to my grandmother. I came to return it." The older guard called for a herald. Within minutes she was surrounded by men in crimson and silver, gently but urgently lifting her by the arms and guiding her through the great wooden doors. The palace swallowed her in silence and marble. Gold-lined columns. Smell of incense. The cold coolness of wealth and history. Her legs buckled, but she was caught. One of the court aides, eyes wide with disbelief, whispered to her, "You may have saved the king." As they led her deeper, past carved doors and murmuring halls, Adama clutched the calabash to her chest. The journey had carved pieces from her, but something inside her stood unshaken. She had brought the past home. With bare feet. With only her truth. And the palace had opened. The palace halls were hushed as Adama was led through corridors paved with ivory-colored stone. Her feet sank into woven rugs with golden borders, but she hardly noticed the splendor. Her focus was fixed on the calabash in her arms and the heaviness in her chest. The guards and attendants spoke in low tones, glancing at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some stepped aside, whispering, "She's the one, the girl with the pendant." They brought her to a private chamber wrapped in soft fabrics and thick silence. The doors were pulled open gently, and inside, a single figure sat on a raised divan beside a small clay lamp. She was aged, cloaked in white silk, and her silver hair was braided in delicate threads. Her eyes, sunken yet still sharp, turned slowly toward the entrance as Adama stepped in. "Your Majesty," one of the aides whispered. "The girl has come." The Queen Mother's gaze fell upon Adama, resting first on her dirt-streaked face, then on her trembling hands clutching the calabash. "Come here, child," she said, her voice soft but filled with ancient strength. Adama stepped forward, kneeling slowly on the woven mat. Her fingers undid the knot one last time. The cloth parted, and the bronze pendant, dulled by time but unmistakable in its carved sunburst, rested in her palm. She held it out in both hands, eyes lowered. The Queen Mother reached forward and gasped. Her fingers brushed the pendant, and the gasp became a sob caught in the chest. She took it gently as though holding a newborn and raised it to her forehead. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. This belonged to me," she whispered. "I wore it in the northern forests, when my son was just a boy. When we fled the fire." She looked at Adama now with wonder, as if seeing something beyond the girl. "I gave it to a girl once. She was quiet, strong. The daughter of one of our cooks. Her name." Her voice broke. Adama's own voice rose, barely a whisper. "Nena. My grandmother." The Queen Mother's breath caught again. "Nena. Yes. She wept when we parted. I told her, this pendant will find the throne again when the land needs healing. She reached forward and pulled Adama into her arms, frail but full of fierce affection. You brought it back. Through fire and betrayal, through hunger and doubt. She pulled away slightly and placed the pendant against Adama's chest, holding it there as if sealing it into her heart. It never left the hands of honor. You have done what even warriors could not. One of the attendants stepped into the chamber. Your Majesty, he said gently, the king, he grows weaker. The Queen Mother stood slowly, regal despite her age. Then it is time. She took Adama's hand in hers and walked toward a set of carved doors. 2 guards opened them as the Queen Mother entered a dimly lit room heavy with herbs, oils, and quiet prayers. At the center the king lay still, eyes closed, skin pale. He was young, not much older than Adama's uncles, but his breath was shallow. Priests murmured chants. Courtiers watched with grave faces. The Queen Mother stepped forward, pendant in hand. My son, she said. No response. My son. I have returned something you lost. She pressed the pendant against his chest and placed her hand over it. The moment stretched like the hush before thunder. Then, the king's eyes fluttered open. A slow breath filled his lungs. His chest rose and stayed lifted. His lips moved faintly. Mother? I'm here, she whispered. And so is your strength. He sat up slowly as gasps echoed through the room. His voice was weak but steady. I feel her. Her courage. Her light. The Queen Mother turned to the room. The Queen's pendant has returned. And with it, the spirit of our people. The king looked past his mother toward the girl standing quietly at the threshold. You brought this back? Adama nodded, eyes lowered. He reached out a hand. What is your name? Adama. Daughter of Ngozi. Granddaughter of Nena. The king smiled. Then you are no less than royalty to me. The room filled with murmurs of awe, but Adama barely heard them. All she saw was the Queen Mother's tear-streaked face shining with pride. And in her heart she heard her grandmother's voice, guard it with honor. Let it return only through truth. Now truth had spoken. And the kingdom had answered. The following morning, palace drums rolled across the courtyards, and a bell was rung from the central tower, a sound reserved only for royal decrees or miracles. News of the king's recovery and the return of the Queen Mother's pendant had spread through the land like wild harmattan wind. Villagers, nobles and commoners alike crowded the palace gates, murmuring stories of a girl who had crossed forests and rivers to bring life back to a dying throne. Adama stood in the palace courtyard, now scrubbed and dressed in a simple white wrapper. Her hair had been brushed, her feet cleaned and bandaged. She stood with quiet dignity between the Queen Mother and the king, as court attendants read aloud the tale of her journey. The king rose, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. This girl, Adama, has returned more than a lost heirloom. She returned faith. She restored strength. She walked the path of fire and came out with truth in her hands. The Queen Mother stood beside her, placing the restored necklace around Adama's neck. She carries the spirit of her grandmother, she said, and the courage that crowns a nation. A golden robe was laid before her, along with a chest filled with coins, beads and silks. A servant stepped forward with delicate sandals embroidered with thread of silver. The crowd hushed. All waited for the girl to kneel and accept her new place among the royals. But Adama stepped forward gently, her voice steady. Your Majesty, she said, bowing her head to both the king and Queen Mother, I am grateful. But I do not ask for gold. The king looked at her, curious. Then what do you ask? My mother, she said simply. Her safety. Her freedom. The crowd murmured. The Queen Mother nodded solemnly. She is still with the man who sold the pendant? Adama nodded. He is cruel but more foolish than wicked. If justice must fall, let it fall on him, not on her. The king's face hardened. Summon him. It took little time. Okoro had already heard the tales, already begun hiding behind broken doors and cheap wine. Palace guards found him near the market, filthy and trembling, his lips cracked, his pride long buried. They dragged him before the court where he knelt, refusing to meet Adama's eyes. Okoro, the king said, his tone like a blade, you sold a royal pendant, the Queen Mother's seal, for palm wine. Okoro's voice barely rose above a croak. I didn't know. I thought it was just village metal. The girl wore it like it was nothing. Then it is ignorance, not treason, the Queen Mother said coolly. But ignorance is not innocence. Adama stepped forward. He did it out of desperation, she said. He drinks because he cannot face himself. He mocks others because he fears being mocked. But his greed didn't break me. It led me here. She turned fully to face him. You took the only thing I had, and yet I still carried more than you ever saw. Okoro raised his head, his lips trembling. He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The Queen Mother turned to the king. Let justice be wrapped in mercy. The king nodded. Okoro will not be jailed. But he will leave the village. He will not return, nor raise a hand to Ngozi or Adama again. Guard stepped forward to carry out the order. Okoro didn't resist. As he was led away, Adama watched him disappear without hatred, only quiet acceptance. Some wounds were too deep to heal with words, but they could stop spreading. Then the gates opened again. Ngozi entered the courtyard, unsure, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, her face tight with fear. She had been told the king summoned her but didn't know why. When she saw Adama standing beside the Queen Mother, dressed in white, wearing the royal pendant, she gasped. Child? Adama ran to her. Mama. They embraced, mother and daughter, one trembling with disbelief, the other with long-awaited peace. I thought I lost you, Ngozi whispered. You never did, Adama replied. You just didn't know where I was going. Behind them, the Queen Mother smiled. The king looked on with warmth in his eyes. And in that moment, in a courtyard of judgment and grace, truth didn't roar. It simply stood. Forgiving. Bright. Full. Adama awoke to the sound of birdsong echoing off the polished marble walls of her new chamber. Sunlight poured in through the carved lattice windows, casting golden patterns across the embroidered sheets. It still felt unreal, this place of gentle voices, endless books, and rooms that smelled of ink and polished wood. 4 days now she had lived among scholars, musicians, and tutors, all of whom treated her with quiet respect. She, the girl who once begged for roasted cassava by the roadside, now read poetry beside the Queen Mother's historian and sang with the royal choir during twilight hours. The king himself had made the offer, a full scholarship to remain in the palace as a royal student, not a servant, not a pet, but a learner. She would study literature, ancient music, the language of royal scripts, and the history of their people. He said, You brought something home to us, let us now give something to you. She had accepted with tears in her eyes and a firm promise in her heart. She would not forget where she came from. Every fortnight, Adama returned to her village, never in a golden cart but walking just as she had before. Her mother, now working freely at a local craft stall, always welcomed her with hugs and a steaming pot of yam porridge. The villagers greeted her with a mix of awe and apology. Some still couldn't look her in the eye, remembering how they had once laughed or turned away. Others offered ripe fruits, hand-woven scarves, or shy smiles. Children followed her, whispering her new name, Ajinwanyi, the girl who carried light. It was the Queen Mother who had given her that name first, during one of their private lessons. Some carry swords, the old woman had said, her fingers gently weaving Adama's hair, but you carried light, and that light guided a kingdom. Near the giant Udala tree where her grandmother used to sit, Adama built a small shrine with her own hands. It wasn't grand, just a circle of carefully placed stones and a wooden post carved with the image of the lost necklace. At the base, she planted wildflowers and painted a message in small, flowing letters. To Nena, who guarded more than gold. Children began to gather there, drawn by the quiet peace that surrounded the tree, and by Adama's voice. She would sit on a low stool and tell stories, not just of the palace and the Queen Mother, but of ancient queens who tamed storms with song, of wise grandmothers who knew where secrets slept in the soil, of girls who walked into the unknown and came back full of stars. One day, as she finished a song about journeys and rivers, a familiar figure stepped from the shadows beneath the mango grove, Obiora. He had grown taller, more confident, but his eyes still held that gentle curiosity. I heard the stories, he said. I had to come see if they were true. They're more than true, she smiled. They're alive. Obiora carried with him a small bag of instruments, a handheld recorder, a kalimba, and a second-hand mic. He asked shyly if she would let him record her songs. She laughed. Only if you promise to let the wind sing with me. Together they began documenting her voice beneath the shrine tree. Lullabies from her grandmother, new verses she wrote during palace lessons, stories turned into melodies. Obiora, now studying sound engineering in the city, would upload them quietly to the village library's radio stream, and soon people across the land began humming her songs again, not as mystery but as memory. She never sought fame. She never wore a crown. But when people saw her walk through markets or down dirt paths, children ran up calling, Ajinwanyi. She always stopped, always smiled, always listened. Because light, she knew, was not something you carried once. It was something you chose to carry again and again, even when the road was long and your feet were tired. Especially then. The palace courtyard glittered beneath a cloud-clear sky, banners of crimson and indigo rippling above rows of citizens who had come from every corner of the realm. Exactly 1 year had passed since the girl with blistered feet and a calabash on her back crossed the threshold of the royal gates. Trumpets sounded, drums rolled, and the king stepped onto the marble dais. Though fully recovered, he still wore the pendant of his mother at his chest, as though to say its work was never finished. He raised a hand and the clamor hushed. "People of Omo-Igui," he began, his voice echoing along colonnades, "we gather not to celebrate conquest but return. A year ago, our kingdom lay beneath a shadow of illness and doubt. Physicians could not lift it, warriors could not fight it, priests could not pray it away. Hope arrived instead on the shoulders of a young villager who carried nothing but truth in her heart." Murmurs swept through the crowd as Adama was guided forward. She wore a plain ivory wrapper, her hair braided simply, no jewels save the sunburst pendant that now rested securely around the Queen Mother's throat. The king gestured for her to stand beside him. "This girl," he continued, "walked rivers and roads, faced thieves and hunger, yet never bartered away honesty. She returned what even royal armies could not find. Let her story remind us, sometimes kingdoms are saved not by spears, but by the courage of a single voice." Applause rose like a warm tide. The king motioned to a steward, who unveiled a small ebony box lined with blue velvet. Inside lay a gleaming silver pendant, newly forged yet shaped exactly like the aged bronze sunburst. Its edges shone with quiet light, and a fresh raffia cord threaded its loop, a humble string for a humble girl. The king lifted it. "In gratitude we present to Adama a new symbol of her journey. Not an heirloom of power but a reminder of promise fulfilled." He placed the pendant around her neck. It settled cool against her collarbone, lighter than she expected, yet it pulsed with a gravity she understood too well. The Queen Mother stepped forward, her eyes bright. "Some inherit titles," she said so that all could hear, "and some earn them." She cupped Adama's cheeks, then kissed her forehead. "You, child, earned ours." A hush fell, thick with emotion. Then cheers erupted, drummers struck their hides, flutists trilled, and petals were thrown into the air. But Adama's gaze drifted across the crowd to the palace gate, beyond which dusty roads wound homeward. She touched the silver pendant and felt its newness, its clean edges, its unspoken challenge: "Carry light again." The carriage offered by the court waited to escort her home, but Adama politely refused. She left the city on foot, her mother at her side and Obiora lagging behind with recording satchels. They moved at dawn, when dew silvers the grass and even crows are slow to complain. Each mile felt lighter than the last. The world no longer loomed over her shoulders, it walked beside her. By late afternoon they reached Umuozu. The village looked smaller, softer, as if the year had trimmed its sharper edges. Children spotted her first, racing ahead yelling, "Ainwanyi! Tinwanyi!" Old women rose from their mats, men paused mid-hammer, and even those who once mocked now nodded with honest respect. Adama offered brief greetings but did not linger. She crossed the yard to the Udala tree where her small stone shrine waited among swaying wildflowers. The carving of the bronze necklace, chiseled by her own hands, had darkened with weather, yet the grooves remained distinct. She knelt, untying a bundle of blossoms gathered along the road, red hibiscus for courage, white frangipani for remembrance. Gently she laid the flowers at the foot of the carving. "Mama Nena," she murmured, brushing dirt from the stones. "We kept your promise." The truth came home. A breeze stirred the leaves overhead, rustling like distant applause. She closed her eyes and felt the weight of two pendants, the bronze she had returned, the silver she now wore. One belonged to history, the other belonged to tomorrow. She pressed the new pendant against her heart. Behind her, Ngozi wept softly, pride shining through tears. Obiora lifted his recorder but hesitated, as if the moment was too sacred to capture. And above them the evening sky melted into gold. Adama rose, dusted her knees, and turned toward the children crowding nearer, eager for a story. She smiled and began, "There once was a necklace that traveled farther than fear. Light fell through the Udala branches, dappled and warm, and the girl who carried it spoke on, knowing that every word planted another seed of truth, and every seed carried its own small flame.